Welcome back, everyone. So we're going to take a quick look at some numbers. I've already done somewhat of a salvaging video on the Reclaimer just because it had PDCs and things associated with it, but it got a bit of a further nerf in last patch, which was, I think, the one that went live yesterday. This is not going to be in the newest changelog because this patch is, they've already at least gotten one patch, if not two, since I did the original video and before I covered this. So there was a bit of a nerf due to the efficiency. You can see it was dropped by 35%. So it went from 0.85 to 0.55. So we're going to take a look at not just the Reclaimer, but all the different ships and kind of compare them. Be mindful when we're looking at these stats, when we're looking at the actual stats of the, and I'm going to pull up a spreadsheet. This is going to be death by Excel. And so if you're not interested in that, I'm sorry, but this is the best way to kind of represent this data. I guess before we get into that, there was a Reddit posting earlier this morning. So I started doing some math related to that. Well, that posting was taken down and a second posting came up from a different person that was really justifying really the area coverage, which I think is an important discussion to have. So I'm going to take a look at both of those. I won't be able to link the first Reddit posting because was taken down, but the second one is there. So I will go ahead and link to that, assuming it's still there. And then I'll give, again, just an overview of my understanding of it, and we'll go from there. So again, when we start looking at this here, you have a speed, radius, and efficiency for each of the different modules you can use. Be mindful this radius is in fact in radius. So when you're looking at, it's not diameter. So when you're looking at the actual ship specs though, you do see it in diameter instead. So you do have to cut that in half to get that comparison. Now let's get into some numbers. So again, we looked at this a little bit before, but these are the base stats associated with each of the different modules. So the cinch is going to be the fastest, and then you have the radius will be the biggest on the trawler, and then the efficiency will still be ahead with the cinch, but the abrade is kind of a mix of all three, whereas efficiency is almost as good as the cinch. The radius is almost half of the trawler. It's 60%. It's actually a little better than half. And then you can see the speed is comparable as well with the abrade. So when you're looking at the numbers, what I've done here is I've divided this up by the trawler. So when you compare the trawler to the cinch is 12 times faster than the trawler, just in hard numbers. And then you can see it's 3 times faster for the abrade than the trawler. However, from the cinch and the abrade here, it is 4 times faster. So I don't have that number represented here, but just know that between this 0.15 and 0.6, that is 4 times, there's a 4 times speed difference there. Looking at radius again, I didn't do the calculation between these two, but you can see the trawler versus the cinch. The cinch does 24 or a quarter of the area compared to the trawler, and then the abrade is at 60%, again, almost 50%. So it's about half the area this can cover. It's a little bit better than that, right? Because it's almost 60%. On top of that, the efficiency, you can see that the cinch is, over 150% better in efficiency compared to the trawler. And then the abrade is, 150% better than the trawler itself. And let's just get into the ships themselves. So the ships each have their own modifiers as well. So we're looking at the Vulture down to the Reclaimer here. We have the Fortune in the middle. So the Vulture has a speed mod of 0.48. It has a radius of 1.0, and then it has an efficiency score of 0.86. And then we have the Fortune, which is 9.6. We have the Fortune at 0.84, and then it shares the efficiency of 0.86 along with the Vulture. I don't know how they really plan to justify this, except for the fact that they're both the same cost outside of the game in the pledge store, because essentially they're using the speed of the Fortune to somewhat make up for the Vulture, because the Vulture has 2 heads, so the Fortune only has 1 salvaging head, so that's its shortcoming, but they're kind of making up with that with the speed. I don't know how they plan to really justify that in lore. The radius is a little bit less here, which, I guess makes sense because there's only 1. But anyways, these are the numbers they have currently, and they're balancing out these two pretty significantly to be pretty similar. And we'll see that within the overall numbers. The Reclaimer itself, though, has its own numbers because it's a big ship. It has 10 times the speed. Well, it has a 10 modifier. It has a 2.18 on the radius. And then it has, again, that nerf, but it is at 55% essentially, or that value is 0.55. So each of these spreadsheets does cover those modifiers based off of the original mod stats. That's all these are. But I've done that as well in this spreadsheet. So we're not really gonna look at each of these tabs, but each of these tabs were brought into this one all spreadsheet. So here we are looking at the numbers again, or I say again because this is my second or third take. I'll zoom in as much as I can here. So now we can see the ships here. So we're going to start from the top with the Fortune, then we'll have the Vulture, and then we'll have the Reclaimer. You can see I've marked in green each individual top value for that particular category, and for that particular ship. So you can see, as we expect, because the cinch has the highest speed, is that it's the highest speed category for each of these. Additionally, you can see from the diameter, the trawler is the biggest in that category. It covers quite a bit more area compared to the others. However, again, you do see this as an diameter because, again, that is how it's represented in the ships category or in the ships section. There could be a math kind of conversion thing here because it does show it in diameter on the ship sheet, but then it's referenced as in radius in the original ship module. So there could be a math error due to that. Anyways, let's keep going. I'm working off the fact that it should be the same. Efficiency score wise, this is the efficiency score. Again, there's a 1.0 efficiency on the cinch, so it's going to be the most efficient, followed up pretty closely though by the abrade. Finally, you have the weighted totals. So this is kind of where originally it kind of comes out, is the cinch is more efficient and its speed makes up for the shortcoming in diameter. So that is the original story that was told in the posting. You can see that from this weighted average based upon all three of these being compared. However, when you want to tell a deeper story here, this is where the second Reddit posting, which really jogged my mind, I wanted to check the math on it, and it does math. The maths. So what you're doing here is you're actually converting this diameter into an area. So you do have to convert this diameter to a radius. So you're going to use pi r squared to get that done. I am using the pi function here instead of just using 3.14. So there might be a numerical difference in the numbers he's going to show. Again, he's just showing the reclaimer. So it's really just doing this comparison here, but it's going to be this along with the last patch, or the live patch, I should say. So in my case, I'm going to show you all the different numbers here and we'll just get into it. So you can see this 19 or, this almost 20 here. These numbers are really what's being covered in the area for the particular ship associated with the trawler here. So obviously the trawler is going to give the most area coverage because it does cover the most area. But again, as we know, that doesn't tell the whole story because this really just means how much area can the beam cover at a time. What you want to figure out next is what's the speed. Well, how much does the speed determine how effective the beam will be? And then you can see the abrade starts to jump ahead. As we talked about before, we talked about the fact that the cinch is 4 times faster than the abrade. So then the big question begins to be, well, hey, if it can cover less area than the cinch, the abrade, if the abrade can cover less area than the cinch, but it can cover it faster, is that meaningful? Well, clearly it's not that meaningful because you can see here that the numbers don't lie here, and in fact, when you compare it to the area and the speed modifier being covered by the abrade, it still comes out on top. Barely actually compared to the trawler here. So this is just the speed modifier, but now when you want to talk about the efficiency, it really starts to come ahead in its own game here. So again, really it comes down to when you compare how much area can be covered by the abrade mixed with the speed modifier and the efficiency of that, then the abrade still comes out on top. Not significantly. I would say even these numbers are close enough that if you had the Ascension, the abrades, that will probably be the go-to at this point. If you want to cover an area, so like for example, when you're covering a salvaging, and I wish I had covered footage for this, but I don't want to waste a lot of time. So ultimately, I haven't captured the footage, but you're covering a whole area with the salvaging beam. That is where the abrade is going to stand out. However, if you're cutting, like just doing the corners on the outsides and stuff like that, and you're not covering a whole area, it is quite possible that the cinch speed could outplay the abrade just because you're doing smaller areas. So this is really a numerical instance where you can't show it in a live view. This particular person did kind of put together some random numbers as well to show a bit of a use case. But I'm still going to think that there's areas where the cinch may be able to come out higher on the abrade, just if you don't have to cover the same area. If you want to cover something quickly and you want a good efficiency, technically the abrade's fine. If you're just using the abrades, that's going to probably come out to be the better option. But there's a chance that the cinch may be able to fill gaps where you don't have to cover as much area. And again, if you're like just salvaging the corners of a ship or something like that, for whatever reason, you're like, it's like a drawing on a drawing, right? If you're using a big paintbrush to paint the whole area, you want the abrade for that. But if you want some fine tuning, you may want the cinch. But again, why switch over to that? Why cut that time? Using the abrades overall is going to be the better option, it appears to be. But there might be chances or opportunities where the cinch could come out a little bit closer. Anyways, that's all I got for y'all. Let me know if you have any questions down below, or if you see some issues with the math I've got here. Maybe my math is not mathing like I thought it was, or my explanation was not good. Again, I'll also link to that Reddit posting. Thank y'all for checking it out. Catch y'all next time. Peace.